All right, so I'm going to start masking off this piece, and I've just got some scrap plastic from my studio, and I'm just going to start using this green painter's tape to hold the plastic down. So I'm masking off these bubbles to help keep the oxide wash that I'm going to use off of the bubbles. So, and I just tear little pieces to fit. And if I can't get in there with my fingers, I'll use a tool to push it down. Okay, so now I'm going to be adding my oxide wash, and I use this black copper oxide that really burns through any glaze, and it gives everything like the nice dark. So my clay body is my whites and my black copper oxide is my darks. So I take a bit of black copper oxide and I put it into a container and I add water to it, and then I start to paint it on my piece and let it dry. And then I take it outside or an area that has ventilation and I dust it off with a paper towel. So I'm going to start painting this on. And as you can tell, I have gloves on. This is a heavy metal. I do want to keep it separate from your body. Right now it's wet, so I'm not worried about the dust coming from it. When I go to brush it off, I'll definitely wear a mask and a respirator. So I'm just going to go ahead and start painting it on. And this is pretty thick. This is going to be a lot of darks. And what this does is it's going to sit down in the cracks of the piece. And when I go to brush it away, it's going to take it off the high points. So, and then when I glaze over the top of this, it'll burn through. And it can interact with different glazes in a lot of different ways. So it's always good to do a test first to see how it's going to interact with those glazes. Like with clear, it will actually turn green. Wherever it's at will turn like this like dark green, which is pretty cool for if that's what you want. Okay, so, and then I actually don't want to get this on the scissors in her hand, because I am going to end up using a white gold luster as the final glazing for this piece. So I've got to be really careful not to get that there, because it will even burn through luster. So I want those to be really bright and gold or silver for this piece. Make it pop a little bit. And then you do have to keep mixing it to keep the black copper oxide suspended. It is a super heavy material, so it'll just sink back down in the bottom. Probably should have masked these scissors off, but if I get a little bit, it's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world. I can try to wash it off. So you do have to be careful when you're reaching down into a piece that you don't pop the little fragile parts off. And then you can let this dry overnight, but at least give it an hour to really get that moisture out, because otherwise when you go to brush it off, it will just smudge if it's still wet. Alright, I just want to make sure I got it underneath too. All right, that part's done. Alright, so I've taken my piece outside and I've dusted off the black copper oxide with a paintbrush and some paper towels. And now I'm going to start applying the glaze. So I really like a watered down surface with bright colors. And so I'm using these Amico semi-moist underglaze colors. But you can water down any underglaze to get the same effect. I just bought this pack a while ago and might as well use it. So I'm just going to lightly spray it like I would watercolor paint. And then I can also mix my colors on the lid here to make them really thin. So this gal is going to have bubbles on her dress, just really light, really faint. And I just like these smaller pieces to be washed out and mostly white. So I'm just going to spray this down. And the bubbles are going to start at the bottom of the dress and go from blue to turquoise to green in pieces, or in segments, I guess. So I'm actually going to use a smaller brush. Let's use this one. Got my watered down glaze. And you want to make sure there's enough color that it's going to show up in the firing and not be too faint. So I'm going to start applying these polka dots. I feel like that's a little light, so I'm going to mix it a little bit darker and reapply it. I'm really enjoying gradations right now. So, but I still want these pieces to be pretty faint. And so now, like I had said before, that black copper oxide is going to burn through the underglaze. So underneath this skirt is a good chance that you won't be able to see it, but I still do the detail just in case. The black copper oxide adds a little bit of an unpredictability to the surface, which I really like, but it makes it also hard to control. So if you try using this black copper oxide wash, there will be times when you're not going to know exactly what it's going to look like, and you may be a little disappointed at first. But don't scrap a piece right away if you don't like it. Give it like a week and you might warm up to it. Alright. And so then one thing that this black copper oxide does that's really cool if you use it in the right way is it burns through all the glazes, but with a clear glaze, anything with a sheen, it's actually going to turn like this dark forest green sort of turquoise color. So I guarantee that some of you will do that on accident, and hopefully it's a good accident. So with this girl, normally I mask off the eyes before I put the black copper oxide, and I forgot this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glaze them and fire it, and then you can use sort of like a resin on the eyelids. Oops, I got the green. You can use some of the resins to get the sheen around the eyes. And when I say by resins, is I usually use like a clear nail polish on top, because if I use a clear glaze, everywhere that has that black copper oxide is gonna be like speckled green, and I don't want her eyes to be green. And this one, so you can see those faint polka dots. I'm gonna rinse out my brush and do the turquoise next. And that turquoise is a pretty powerful color with underglaze, so I might start out with a little bit light. You can always go darker, can't always go lighter. That was really light. And then I kind of like offsetting some of the polka dots from each other through a fold. It gives it like a nice quality of moving fabric or crumpled up fabric. Color's getting a little dark here. And then if I get underglaze on her skin, it's definitely not what I want to have happen. But I gotta get it off, so got a little bit on the back of her arm here. And I'm just gonna clean it off. And then if I smudge that black copper at all, I need to even it out. So, doesn't look like I just wiped a big spot off of it. I'll move to the other side here. Keep working those polka dots on. And I'm trying to get these dots as even as I can. So I'm making that circle in one full movement so that I don't get super concentrated brush strokes in the circles. All right. Bring this up a little bit higher. Okay. And I like adding these polka dots because it gives like a little reference towards childhood clothing. And it gives the piece a little bit more sweetness for this darker, harder content of vulnerability. There's the polka dots. And now if these become too washed out in the firing or aren't as bright as I would like them to be, I can always touch it up with acrylic paint afterwards. Okay, so now that I've glazed her dress, I'm going to go ahead and start glazing her hair, and I'm going to make her a redhead because there are a lot of redheads in my family, and when I was younger I always wanted to be a redhead. I think I still do, but so, and then I'm brushing on this thinned out orange, and I'm really trying to fan it out as I go so there's no hard edges. And if there's a little bit of hard edges in hair, that's okay, because it just gives it a little bit more depth in chunks, because our hair varies throughout. So I'm just going to keep painting this orange on. And then with this black copper oxide, I want to keep it moving. So that's also why I use the black copper oxide. I don't think that made very much sense. So when I'm brushing on the underglaze, the black copper oxide is moving, and I have to make sure that I get it to move throughout the whole piece of the hair, because otherwise it will dry with like drip lines and like really thick color in certain spots that I don't want. So I've got a little puddle of just water on my palette here, and then I've also got my watered down orange so I can keep that color moving down the hair so I don't get any hard lines. And so I'm just really alternating between the two. Now if you wanted just straight solid orange, it would be best to spray it, mask everything off and spray it. But again, I want that white clay to show through to give it depth. So I've got my highs and my lows. And so after that first layer of underglaze and water, that black copper oxide is going to stay there when it dries. So when I do if I want to do a second, third, fourth layer, it's not going to move as much as it is right now. So that's why you want to get it right on this first layer too. Just faint color goes a long ways. So then I'm going to do my eyes, and I want her to have blue and orange. So I'm going to start off with some pretty faint color just to kind of map out where her eyes are going to be. And I want her gazing up. So I think that's a pretty good, because then this way, if I mess it up, I don't have to try to wash away the whole eyeball. And another thing that's good about this too is if I don't like the way it looks in this first firing, I can go back with acrylic paint and redo it. So this is kind of like my first attempt, and if I don't nail it the first go, I can either go back and repaint the whole eye or just add some more color to it before I put on the nail polish, my clear resin. Okay, so now I'm just going to start adding a little bit more color blocks to it, a little bit thicker glaze. Okay. And then I'm going to start adding in some orange, small tiny little orange spots to it. Maybe just 3 little orange spots. And then I'll let that dry. Use a little bit of green. Just over the, I think just 2 dots there. And then I'll go back over with that blue. Give it a little more subtlety. Blend it a little. Okay, and then I'll let that dry before I put the black pupils in. I might use a smaller brush to get back there under this piece so that I don't get sloppy. I've been doing a lot of house painting in our place and gotten really good at cutting in. So if you just kind of shake your brush a little bit when you get to an uneven edge, it'll make it look like a nice smooth line. Oops, a little bit of black copper everywhere. Black copper is sitting down in that crack where the masking ended and the sculpture of the girl started. So I'm trying not to move that around too much. Let that just sit there. And I don't mind if the clear brushes up on the feet at all, or a little bit, because then it kind of gives the effect that she's squishing into the bubbles a little bit. So now I'll use a different luster on the bubbles. I'm going to use mother of pearl to give it that like oily sheen. And then I'll have to pick this up to get that bottom bubble. So let's see if you... Oh, I got the toe. Have to clean that up. Alright. And then use a teeny tiny brush for this gap so hopefully I don't glob it onto her feet. Even smaller one. Alright, then I can switch back to my big brush and get cruising here. And then I'll pick this up too, just to really make sure I've got a nice even thickness on that bottom edge. Because the mother of pearl luster does not like any of the glaze to be thin. Oops, I brought up some of that black copper oxide. Okay, so I'll go ahead and pick it up here. my dry spot. And then I'm just brushing down around that edge. I'll have to clean up this bottom a bit before I put it in the kiln. Make sure it doesn't melt to it. And then while I've got it here, I'm going to clean off that little toe that got the glaze on it, hopefully. If I can get it thin enough, it won't show up. But and then I'll clean up that bottom really well before I put it in the kiln. I always check my bottoms of my sculptures before I fire them, when they're glazed with clear glaze anyway, just to make sure. It's a good habit to get into. And then I'm just going to go ahead and put on another coat on everything, because I have learned that you may think you've got it all, but after it's fired, I don't want to have to do the clear glaze firing again. Make it nice and thick on this bottom so that I don't, maybe if it does get black copper there, it'll burn through a little easier, or slow it down a little bit, I mean. Okay, I'm going to hit those scissors one more time too, just to make sure I got it all. So my clay body is 04 maturation, and yeah, so I'll put this in the kiln at 04, fire to 04, and then I'll do the mother of pearl luster and the white gold. Okay.